Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Time for another spooky season special as I scrounge through the last of my horror trade paperbacks. And I've had a few videos before this where I wondered out loud whether the trade I was looking at that point was technically horror, because there are a few that are kind of borderline, right? So this one kind of makes up for that. This one is definitely horror. This is Crossed by Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows. So I did a Garth Ennis book earlier this week, and I mentioned in that one that Garth Ennis has a particularly bleak outlook on humanity, really. And this one kind of hammers that home. I would say if there's one thing that truly horrifies Garth Ennis, at least as far as I can ascertain through his writing, it's people. Just their capacity for cruelty and meanness. So I can't show you all of this one because there is going to be some extremely gory pages. So there may be a bit more editing on this issue than there have been on previous ones. We'll have to see how it goes. But basically the premise on this one, this is a zombie book, but a zombie book with a bit of a twist. They don't just eat you, although they will eat you, but if they just kill you and eat you, you probably got off lucky. So something happens in the world in this that becomes a plague, a zombie plague. It's spread by bodily fluids, which doesn't sound like it would necessarily be the most dangerous plague, except that once you're infected, you're compelled to infect as many other people with your bodily fluids as possible. And yeah, you can take that pretty much any way you want. And we start out with a group who all just happen to be in, I was going to say the wrong place at the wrong time. It's kind of the right place at the wrong time in that they weren't at the site of a nuclear bomb. And in this world, nukes have gone off occasionally. And they weren't in a concentrated city area. So naturally they band together and they try to survive. And they've all got theories along the way about where they should go, what they should do, how the Crossed became what they are. And they're called the Crossed because once you're infected with this, you get this sort of rash that shows up on your face in the shape of a cross. Nobody's exactly sure what that's about. It's never really explained, at least not in the issues I've read. This is the kind of book, for me, you can only read so many issues of. After a while, it just feels gratuitous. But it's really just a story of a bunch of survivors trying to make their way in a post-apocalyptic world with the worst possible zombies coming after them. So in the issues I've read, there is no real explanation for how the Crossed came to be what they are or why they do what they do. But what they do, basically, is they do all of the worst possible things that people can do. I'm talking murder, I'm talking rape, I'm talking torture. And while they're on the run from them, our group of survivors have to make a bunch of moral choices to continue their survival or just to help out people or, refuse to help out people along the way. And you can say, well, that just sounds kind of gratuitous and pointless. And I mean, to a degree it is, but I think this is just Garth Ennis' statement about people's capacity for evil. Because he says in the book, the Crossed don't do anything that hasn't been done by people before. They're just compelled to do it all. And I mean, it does create an extremely scary monster for our protagonist to try to escape. So there is that. Because you really don't want to get caught by the Crossed. If for some reason the Crossed are closing in on you, and you happen to have a gun with at least one bullet, you should use that bullet on yourself immediately. So in addition to trying to make a horrific monster, and a book that puts relatable characters in extremely difficult situations, like more difficult than just about anybody will ever have to be in, hopefully. Can't show you the next page. I will say the next couple of pages, the first time I read them, I had difficulty looking at. But yeah, in addition to the monsters and the heroes, I think there's a focus on trying to show what people would actually do in a post-apocalyptic situation. And the fact is, most of them would die. They aren't useful enough. There aren't enough resources out there, or at least not enough that people know how to exploit. And there's too much of the threat around them for them to be able to go into city centers and find, because there would be all sorts of resources in there theoretically, but you can't go in them. So the story is good, although it can be pretty hard to take sometimes. The art is okay. Again, this is Jason Burrows, who also did Providence. He's got a pretty rudimentary style. He doesn't use a lot of shadow. He doesn't use a lot of rendering. he does go pretty heavy on the detail for backgrounds, and probably most importantly for horror comics, which I feel like he draws a lot of. He doesn't seem to have any problem drawing anything. Anything he will take a stab at, and even if it's not necessarily the most realistic looking thing in the world, it is drawn in a way so that you can totally imagine this thing existing in the world of the comic book that you're reading. There is, of course, the difficulty with some of the detailed backgrounds of not knowing exactly how much of it is traced, but that's when they're in cities, which doesn't happen a lot of the time. A lot of the time, they're just out in the woods somewhere, because that's where you'd have to be if you're going to, make any kind of headway in escaping the Crossed. So yeah, pretty good story, reasonably good art, like good enough. That's about it. Like, his figure work is stiff, his expressions are okay. He's not always the most imaginative when it comes to things like, I don't know, like panel design, page design, that kind of thing, or even just what sort of angle to shoot from. But he's good at capturing like a documentary feel. Like, there's a matter of factness to pretty much everything he does. And I think that might be the most important part of his artwork and does kind of make it work for this story. Maybe better than that guy did for Caliban. So anyway, that's The Crossed. Like I said, an extremely nasty, mean-spirited sort of horror book. Like, not mean-spirited in the way that it's trying to offend you, or it's trying to trick you into looking at shit that is just reprehensible. Like, by the time you get to the really reprehensible shit, you know what the book's about. It's very upfront in its nastiness, and it does a good job of kind of varying the pace enough so that you can get eased in to just how nasty the world is. And I mean, by the time you get to that double-page splash that I would not flip to, you realize the world is about as nasty as it could possibly get. So, I mean, that's a good book for some people. I read it every once in a while still, because the characters are still, they're really good characters. And like, you want to see if they make it to the end, right? Like, probably one or two of them's got to make it to the end. Yeah, probably. So somehow this book caught on. I'm not entirely sure how. I know there was going to be a movie or TV series at one point, and I guess somebody decided they didn't want to do that and make it NC-17, so what's the point? The actual comic got well over issue 100, although Garth Ennis didn't write more than, this first arc and then another arc, I don't know, somewhere in there. I think around issue 100, actually. So, yeah. Fucked up series. Pretty good first trade, though, if you don't mind subjecting yourself to some truly horrifying shit. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. I've got at least one more extremely bleak Garth Ennis trade coming up at some point, so we can look forward to that. But I'll try and lighten it up in the meantime. So thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.